Your soulmate is happier than they have been in years, and the reason may surprise everyone who thought they understood what they needed from you. At 7:12 this morning, they were standing alone on the stage of the old Marlowe Theatre when an email appeared on their phone. The auditorium was empty. Rows of red velvet seats disappeared into darkness. Half the stage lights had already been turned off because the theater's electricity account was overdue. A notice taped to the lobby doors said that all performances were suspended while the company entered financial restructuring. Your soulmate opened the email. They read the first sentence once. Then again. Then they sat down on the edge of the stage and started crying. But these were not the tears their sister Naomi expected. Naomi came running from backstage because she thought something terrible had happened. Instead, your soulmate looked up at her and laughed through the tears. Naomi asked, "What happened?" Your soulmate handed her the phone. The message had come from an attorney. It said, "Your personal guarantee has been formally released. You are no longer legally responsible for Marlowe Theatre's outstanding debt." Naomi stared at them. Then she asked the question nobody in their family understood. "Why are you smiling?" "We're losing control of the theater." Your soulmate looked around the room where they had spent almost their entire life. Then they answered, "Because they finally did the one thing I secretly needed them to do." Naomi thought your soulmate meant you had paid the debt. You had not. In fact, only 3 days earlier, your soulmate's father had called you and asked you to transfer $1.8 million to prevent the family from losing control of Marlowe Theatre. You refused. The family called you cold, ungrateful, vindictive. Your soulmate's father told everyone you were finally showing your true character. But this morning your soulmate was happier than ever because you had refused. And the reason begins with something they once whispered to you almost 2 years ago. Something you did not fully understand at the time. They said, "Sometimes I think everybody keeps saving this place because nobody wants to admit I'm the one being sacrificed to it." Marlowe Theatre had belonged to your soulmate's family for almost 90 years. Their great-grandfather purchased it when it was little more than an abandoned performance hall with a leaking roof and 2 dressing rooms. Their grandmother restored the ceiling by hand. Their mother, Claire, transformed Marlowe into one of the most respected independent theaters in the city. Actors who later became famous had performed there before anyone knew their names. Schoolchildren attended free afternoon performances. Local writers tested new plays on Tuesday nights. Your soulmate grew up backstage. They learned to read from old scripts. They completed homework in dressing rooms. They knew which stage door stuck during winter and which balcony seat gave the best view even though the ticket was cheaper. Their mother loved the theater. Your soulmate loved their mother. For years, those two things became almost impossible to separate. When Claire became ill, your soulmate left university for what was supposed to be 1 semester. They never returned. They helped run Marlowe while Claire received treatment. When she died, your soulmate's father, Graham, told them, "Your mother kept this place alive for you." That sentence became a chain. Not intentionally at first. But every time your soulmate talked about doing something else, Graham reminded them what Claire had built. Every time they wanted to travel, another production needed help. Every time they considered returning to school, Marlowe needed money. Every time your soulmate imagined a life beyond the theater, someone described leaving as abandonment. Then you arrived. You were not an actor. You were not a wealthy donor. You worked with organizations that were trying to survive without destroying the thing that made them worth saving. Marlowe had applied for a city preservation grant. You had been asked to review its finances and operating structure. Your first meeting with Graham lasted 43 minutes. He spent most of it telling you about famous performers who had once appeared on the stage. You spent most of it asking why the theater had lost money for 6 consecutive years. Finally, Graham said, "Marlowe isn't supposed to be judged like a supermarket." You answered, "No. A supermarket usually knows when it can't afford the lights." Your soulmate nearly laughed. Graham did not. The financial problem was serious. Ticket sales were inconsistent. The theater maintained 3 storage properties it barely used. Several senior managers were paid through outdated contracts. Productions were being approved based on personal relationships rather than realistic budgets. Yet the solution was not simply cutting everything. You understood that quickly. You recommended selling 1 storage building. You protected the youth program. You reduced administrative spending. You refused to eliminate Tuesday night newswriter performances even though they barely made money. Graham asked why. You said, "Because if everything that doesn't make immediate profit disappears, eventually you save the building and kill the reason people cared about it." Your soulmate remembered that sentence. You also noticed something about them. They were everywhere. Ticket office. Rehearsals. Payroll. Fundraising. Costumes. Donor dinners. Emergency repairs. If an actor became sick, your soulmate solved it. If a supplier threatened to stop deliveries, your soulmate called them. If Graham forgot something, your soulmate remembered. Everyone described them as indispensable. You saw something else. They were exhausted. One night, you found them asleep at a desk beside a half-eaten dinner. You placed your coat over their shoulders. They woke immediately. "What time is it?" "Late. I have to finish these." "No," they stared at you. You closed the folder. "You have to sleep." They smiled. "You're very controlling for someone technically hired by my family." You answered, "I'm billing them for this conversation." That became the beginning. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners became late walks after rehearsals. One evening, your soulmate took you onto the stage after everyone had gone home. Only one work light remained. They stood beneath it and looked toward the empty seats. "My mother used to say this room feels completely different when nobody is watching." You asked, "How?" "Honest." You looked at them. "Maybe because nobody is expecting a performance." Your soulmate became quiet. That sentence reached somewhere deeper than you intended. They kissed you that night. Within a year, you were not simply helping Marlowe. You were part of their life. You knew Naomi. You attended Graham's birthday dinner. You helped your soulmate clean Claire's old office when they finally became ready. You found an unfinished letter inside one drawer. It was addressed to your soulmate. They could not read it. They placed it back. You never pushed. Then Marlowe's biggest crisis arrived. A property investment Graham had made years earlier collapsed. The theater had guaranteed part of the loan. Suddenly Marlowe owed more than $4 million. The bank wanted repayment. The preservation grant could not legally be used. Closing seemed possible. Graham gathered the family. He said, "If Marlowe closes, your mother's life's work disappears." Your soulmate immediately started looking for solutions. You noticed what happened. Everyone else became scared. Your soulmate became responsible. Again. A wealthy investor named Roland Vane offered help. Roland owned entertainment venues across the country. He proposed paying off most of Marlowe's debt and funding renovations. In exchange, his company would receive 49% ownership and commercial control over several major productions. Graham loved the proposal. You did not. Roland wanted Marlowe's name. Its history. Its reputation. But the agreement allowed him to replace most of the artistic board after 3 years. You warned your soulmate, he is not buying half the theater. He is buying a path to the rest of it. Your soulmate asked, "What alternative do we have?" You suggested restructuring. Selling and used property. Reducing the production schedule. Creating an employee trust. Possibly allowing the family to lose majority ownership. Graham became furious. He said, "So your solution is to take Marlowe away from us?" You replied, "My solution is to stop pretending family ownership and survival are the same thing." That argument reached your soulmate. Not because they disagreed. Because secretly, they knew you were right. And that terrified them. If the family lost control of Marlowe, your soulmate would finally be free to ask a question they had avoided for years. Did they actually want to run it? One night, they told you the truth. Both of you were sitting inside the costume room while rain hit the high windows. They said, "If the theater became stable tomorrow, everyone would expect me to become director." You asked, "Do you want to?" Silence. Then, "I don't know." You waited. Your soulmate continued, "Sometimes I imagine leaving and I feel guilty before I even decide where I'm going." You said, "That isn't a decision. That's conditioning." They looked hurt. You apologized for the word. But they said, "No. I think that's why it hurt." Then came the sentence you would remember much later. "Sometimes I think everybody keeps saving this place because nobody wants to admit I'm the one being sacrificed to it." You asked, "Do you want me to stop helping?" Your soulmate immediately said no. That was the contradiction. They loved Marlowe. They loved the employees. They loved Claire's memory. They were terrified of watching the theater die. But every time somebody rescued it completely, their obligation restarted. Another crisis solved. Another year sacrificed. Another reason to delay choosing their own life. Then Roland made the conflict worse. He told Graham privately that your restructuring plan would reduce the family's control. That was true. But he described your motives differently. He said you wanted to weaken Graham so you could eventually influence Marlowe through your relationship with his child. Graham believed him. He began questioning you in meetings. Your soulmate defended you. Then Graham showed them something. A draft restructuring model from your office. One possible scenario gave a future employee trust majority voting power. Another seat on the board was reserved for an independent chair. Graham pointed at it. Your partner wants to remove this family from its own theater. Your soulmate said, they're showing options. Graham replied, they always have an explanation. Then he asked, if they loved you, why would they make it easier for you to lose your mother's theater? That question was cruel because it reversed everything. You were trying to free them from an obligation. Graham made it sound like you were trying to steal their inheritance. Your relationship changed. Your soulmate started defending Marlowe before you even criticized it. When you suggested selling one unused property, they heard abandonment. When you questioned Graham, they heard disrespect. When you asked whether they still wanted a life outside the theater, they heard pressure. Eventually you asked, are we still talking about what you want, or only what everybody needs from you? They became angry. They're my family. I know. This place matters to me. I know. Then stop acting like leaving is the only healthy choice. You stared at them. I never said you should leave. You don't have to. That conversation ended badly. 2 weeks later, your soulmate signed a personal guarantee connected to Roland's rescue financing. You found out after it happened. The guarantee meant that if Marlowe failed to meet certain repayment targets, your soulmate could become personally responsible for almost $2 million. You were stunned. You signed this? Yes. Why? Because Roland wouldn't release the funds without it. You just made leaving almost impossible. Your soulmate became defensive. I'm not planning to leave. You looked at them. That was when both of you understood. Not planning. Or not allowed. You said, this is exactly what you told me you were afraid of. They replied, I was afraid of losing Marlowe too. The argument escalated. Finally your soulmate said, I need you to stop trying to rescue me from a life I haven't asked you to rescue me from. You went quiet. Then you answered, okay. They expected you to argue. You did not. That frightened them more. Roland's money saved the theater temporarily. For 8 months, things looked better. Renovations began. Ticket sales improved. Graham celebrated. Your relationship with your soulmate became more distant. Eventually both of you stopped pretending. You separated. There was no dramatic betrayal. No third person. No public fight. Just exhaustion. Your final conversation happened on the Marlowe stage. Your soulmate said, "I love you. I just don't know how to love you," while feeling like every conversation is about whether I'm living the wrong life. You answered, "I don't think your life is wrong." They looked at you. "I think you've forgotten you're allowed to choose it." They cried. So did you. Then you left. For months, you stayed away from Marlowe. You did not call Graham. You did not interfere with Roland. You did not ask Naomi for information. And your soulmate tried to convince themselves this was what they wanted. Then the theater failed one of Roland's financial targets. He invoked the guarantee. The amount due was $1.8 million. Marlowe could not pay it. Your soulmate could not pay it personally. Roland offered a solution. He would forgive the guarantee if the family gave his company majority voting control. Graham was prepared to sign. Your soulmate was trapped. If they refused, they could lose nearly everything they owned. If they agreed, Roland gained control of Marlowe anyway. Naomi called you. You had not spoken in months. She said, "I know you don't owe us anything." You listened. Then she told you about the guarantee. You asked, "Does your sibling know you called?" "No, don't tell them." Naomi thought that meant you were going to quietly pay everything. Graham thought the same thing when he discovered she had contacted you. He called you the next morning. For the first time in months, Graham spoke gently. He said, "I know things ended badly, but you understand what Marlowe means to them." You answered, "Yes." He asked you for $1.8 million. He offered you a secured interest in one of the theater's properties. You refused. Graham became silent. Then angry. You have the ability to stop this. I know. They could lose everything. No. They could lose everything because they signed a guarantee they should never have been asked to sign. Graham said, "This isn't the time for lessons." You replied, "No. It's the first time everyone has run out of money to avoid learning one." Then you ended the call. Graham told your soulmate. He said, "They refused." Your soulmate felt something break. Not because they expected your money. Because some hidden part of them had still believed you would come. You always came. Broken budget. Missed payroll. Emergency repair. You solved things. They sat alone in Claire's office that night. Then they opened the unfinished letter you had found years earlier. For the first time, they read it. Claire had written it during treatment. Most of the letter was ordinary. She told your soulmate how proud she was. She remembered their childhood. Then near the end came a paragraph that changed everything. "If you ever stay at Marlowe because you think leaving would mean leaving me, please go. I built a theater. I did not build a prison for my child." Your soulmate read those words until the page blurred. Claire continued, "If Marlowe survives, let it survive because enough people want to carry it together. Never become the person everybody needs to sacrifice so they can keep calling something a family legacy." Your soulmate cried for almost an hour. Then they remembered what you had told them. You had not invented their fear. Their mother had seen it too. The following morning, your soulmate told Graham they would not sign Roland's control agreement. Graham panicked. "What about the guarantee?" "I don't know." "You could lose your apartment." "I know." "Your savings." "I know." "Marlowe." Your soulmate looked at him. "Maybe Marlowe has to become something different. Graham accused you of poisoning them against the family even though you had not spoken." Your soulmate replied, "They refused to save us." "Exactly." "No, Dad. You don't understand." For the first time, your soulmate was beginning to. You refusing to pay had done something every rescue before it prevented. It forced the family to face reality. Roland filed notice that he intended to enforce the guarantee. That was when the first hidden thing you had done became visible. Your attorney contacted him. Months earlier, after learning how Roland's financing was structured, you had quietly purchased one smaller piece of Marlowe's secondary debt from another lender. Not enough to control the theater. Enough to have legal standing during restructuring. Roland could not simply take majority control without negotiating around your claim. Graham immediately assumed this proved his old accusation. "You bought our debt." Your soulmate looked devastated. For one moment, they wondered whether you had been planning this all along. Then your attorney showed them the terms. You had written a restriction into the debt purchase. You could not foreclose on Marlowe's theater building. You could not convert the debt into ownership. You could not claim a board seat. Your position could be used for only one purpose: to force an independent restructuring if another creditor attempted to take control. Your soulmate stared at the document. Naomi asked, "Then what do they get?" The attorney answered, "Nothing they didn't already pay for." That was the first reveal. You had quietly placed yourself between Roland and the theater. But you still refused to pay the $1.8 million. Why? Because you had finally understood what your soulmate needed. Not another rescue that restored the old system. A way out of it. Your attorney proposed restructuring. Marlowe would enter temporary protection. The unused properties would be sold. Roland would be repaid partially. Your debt claim would be reduced. Employees and community donors would receive shares through a new trust. The Graham family would lose majority ownership. Most importantly, your soulmate's personal guarantee would be released. Graham rejected it immediately. "This ends our family control." Your attorney replied, "It ends the personal guarantee." Graham said, "Those are the same thing." Your soulmate finally answered, "No. They never should have been." The decision went to mediation. Roland fought. Graham fought. Your soulmate did something nobody expected. They supported the restructuring. For the first time, they chose a solution that protected Marlowe without requiring them to own its future. 3 days ago, the agreement was approved. This morning, your soulmate received the final release. They owed nothing. Their apartment was safe. Their savings were safe. The theater would survive. But the family would no longer control it alone. That was why they sat on the stage crying and smiling. Naomi asked, "So that's what you meant? They finally stopped rescuing us?" Your soulmate shook their head. Not exactly. Then the deeper truth arrived. The restructuring attorney handed them a second file. Your soulmate had assumed you would recover most of the money you spent purchasing the debt. You would not. To make the employee trust possible, somebody needed to absorb part of the loss. You had agreed to write off nearly 40% of your claim. Naomi stared at the number. They're losing this much? Yes. Then they did rescue Marlowe. Your soulmate read the next page. No, the attorney explained. You had agreed to lose money only after the family surrendered majority control and after your soulmate's personal guarantee was cancelled. You refused every proposal that preserved Graham's authority while keeping your soulmate financially trapped. You were willing to protect the theater. You were no longer willing to protect the system that kept requiring your soulmate to sacrifice themselves. Then the attorney gave them one final document. During negotiations, Roland had offered you a private deal. If you withdrew your objection, he would repay your debt in full and give you a profitable ownership stake in the renovated theater. You refused. Your written response contained only 2 paragraphs. The second said, "I did not enter this process to replace one person controlling Marlowe with another. If the theater survives, it should survive without making one person's freedom the collateral." Your soulmate stopped reading. They covered their face. That was the thing they had secretly needed. Not your money. Not another promise. Not for you to fight their father harder. They needed one person who loved them enough to stop making their sacrifice sustainable. For years, every crisis ended the same way. Something went wrong. Everyone panicked. Your soulmate stepped forward. Someone found money. Marlowe survived. Nothing changed. Then another crisis arrived. You broke the pattern. And because you broke it, your soulmate finally had to make the choice nobody else could make for them. They chose themselves without destroying Marlowe. Later this morning, your soulmate walked into Claire's old office. Graham was there packing files. He will remain involved in Marlowe artistically, but he no longer controls the finances. He looked at your soulmate and said, "I hope you're happy." He meant it bitterly. Your soulmate answered, "I think I am." Graham looked surprised. Your soulmate continued, "For the first time, Marlowe can survive without me proving I love it every day." They gave him Claire's letter. He read the paragraph. His face changed. He had never known she wrote it. Your soulmate said, Mum didn't ask me to stay. Graham sat down. For years, he had used Claire's memory as an argument. Now her own words had removed it. He began crying. Your soulmate did not attack him. They simply said, I need you to stop calling my freedom abandonment. Then they left. This afternoon, your soulmate did something else. They resigned from the executive director position everyone assumed they would eventually take. Naomi asked what they were going to do. Your soulmate smiled. I don't know. Naomi laughed. You're happy about not knowing? Yes. Because uncertainty felt different when it was chosen. For the first time, your soulmate could imagine taking the documentary course they abandoned years earlier. Traveling. Working somewhere nobody knew the Marlowe name. Maybe returning later. Maybe not. The theater would continue. Claire's memory would continue. And your soulmate could finally discover who they were when nobody needed them to save a building. Then Naomi asked the question they had been avoiding all day. What about them? Meaning you. Your soulmate looked toward the stage. They said, I owe them an apology. Naomi asked, do you want them back? Your soulmate was quiet. Then, yes. But they did not stop there. I also understand that wanting them back doesn't mean I get them back. That is another reason they are happier now. They are no longer trying to make love responsible for rescuing them either. Your soulmate opened your old conversation. The last message between both of you was still there. Months earlier, you had written, I hope one day you choose Marlowe because you want it, or leave because you want something else. I just hope the choice finally belongs to you. At the time, your soulmate thought the message sounded cold. Today, they understood it. They started typing. The first draft said, you were right. They deleted it. Too simple. The second said, thank you for saving Marlowe. Deleted. That was not what you did. Finally, I received the release this morning. They stared at the sentence. Then continued, for months, I thought the thing I needed from you was another rescue. I was angry when you refused. I understand now that another rescue would have kept everything exactly the same. Then, you protected Marlowe without protecting the arrangement that kept me trapped inside it. Your soulmate paused. They added, I once accused you of trying to rescue me from a life I had not asked you to rescue me from. You listened more carefully than I realized. You stopped deciding for me. You created enough room for me to finally decide for myself. Then they wrote the hardest part. I am happier today than I have been in years. Not because the theater failed. It did not. Not because their family lost everything. They did not. Not because you returned. You have not. They are happier because Marlowe's survival is no longer tied to their sacrifice. Your soulmate continued, I love my mother. I love this theater. I love my family. And for the first time, none of those sentences requires me to disappear inside them. Then they told you they resigned. They told you about Claire's letter. They admitted they finally understood why you refused Graham's request. And they acknowledged the cost you absorbed. They wrote, "I will never treat what you lost financially as something I can repay with love. You chose a structure that gave you less control, less money, and no guarantee that I would ever speak to you again. Then, that is how I know you were not trying to win me." Your soulmate stopped. Because there was one more truth. They still love you. But unlike before, they no longer need that love to decide who they are. And strangely, that makes the love feel cleaner. Less desperate. Less connected to Marlowe. They wrote, "I still love you. But I don't want to contact you because I finally need someone to save me. I'm contacting you because for the first time, I don't." That sentence stayed. Naomi read nothing. She only asked, "Are you going to send it?" Your soulmate looked toward the empty auditorium. Then smiled. Yes. Not with a demand. Not with an invitation to immediately rebuild the relationship. Not with a dramatic promise. They ended the message with, "If one conversation is still possible, I would like it somewhere outside Marlowe. Somewhere neither of us has a role to perform. If it isn't possible, I still needed you to know what your decision gave me." Then one final line, "You finally let me choose." Your soulmate pressed send. For several minutes, nothing happened. No reply. They did not panic. That mattered too. Months ago, silence from you would have felt unbearable. Today, your soulmate placed the phone down. They walked through Marlowe one more time. Past Claire's office. Past the costume room where they once told you they felt trapped. Past the stage where both of you kissed beneath one work light. Then they opened the lobby doors. Sunlight entered the building. Outside, workers were replacing the old restructuring notice with a new sign. It said, "Marlowe Theatre will reopen under community ownership." Your soulmate stared at it. Then laughed. Not because everything was perfect. Graham was still hurt. Roland was still angry. Money still needed to be raised. The theater still faced difficult years. And they did not know whether you would answer. But for the first time, uncertainty did not feel like danger. It felt like possibility. Your soulmate is happier than ever today. And the thing you finally did was not chase them. Not rescue their family again. Not pay whatever amount was necessary to restore the old life. You did something harder. You stopped making it possible for everyone around your soulmate to continue using their loyalty as collateral. You protected what genuinely mattered. The employees. The building. The performances. Claire's legacy. But you refused to protect the belief that your soulmate had to sacrifice their entire future for those things to survive. That was what they secretly needed. Someone who loved them enough to let the crisis become a choice. Someone who would accept being misunderstood temporarily instead of buying another year of the same unhappiness. Someone who could lose money without using sacrifice as leverage. Someone who could protect them without taking control of their life. And now there is only one thing your soulmate does not know. Whether your phone will light up tonight. Whether you will read, "You finally let me choose." And decide one conversation is possible. Maybe you will. Maybe you will not. For once, your soulmate is prepared for either answer. Because their happiness is no longer waiting inside somebody else's decision. But if you do answer, you will not be meeting the person who once needed Marlowe, Graham, Claire's memory, or even you to tell them who they were. You will be meeting someone who finally knows. And perhaps that is why your soulmate is smiling today. They still love you. They still hope. But for the first time, they are not asking love to save them. You already gave them the one thing they secretly needed more. The freedom to finally save themselves.